We are 5 days into this new year of 2020. And maybe by now you have grown accustomed already and gotten yourself into writing 2020 on your checks and other things. And yet this is still just the first assembly that we're having in 2020. So I'm glad you're here. We have a really good crowd this morning, and I hope you're blessed by what we say. And I want to do things a little bit differently this morning in terms of not going into a series. I will do that starting next Lord's Day. At least that's what we're planning. I want to kind of talk a little differently as I begin this morning. I want to begin by expressing appreciation to all of you. First of all, appreciation for your allowing me to speak like this week after week after week. I never intended to do this. I never planned on doing this. Certainly not to this extent and for this long, and yet it has been really, really good for me. It has allowed me to study through some materials that I really have never studied before. And so I want to tell you how much I'm grateful to you for allowing me to do this. And I'm grateful to you for also allowing yourself to sit through all these long series. You know, that's kind of how I do it. I kind of think you learn more of God's will that way. And so we spent, almost a year in the Gospel of Mark and a year and a half in the Gospel of Luke and in the last 6 months in the book of James, which we're through with that. But I want to thank you for your willingness to study through those kind of materials. Then I want to thank you for something else. I listened to a speaker in the last bit of time, the last few days at least, speak on the subject of organizational development. He's an organizational psychologist, and he studied over 30,000 employees of organizations. And he said, I've decided to divide the people up, the employees up, as givers or takers. Givers or takers. And he said that his research shows that the more givers that you can have inside of your organization. Now, he's not talking about giving money or anything like that. He's just talking about people who are willing to give of themselves above and beyond. And people are willing to reach out and help others within the organization. He says the more givers you have inside of an organization, the healthier the organization. And I started thinking about the kingdom of God. God planned for His kingdom to be made up of givers, did He not? Remember Luke chapter 6, verses 37 and 38, where He says, do not judge, and you'll not be judged. Do not condemn, you'll not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it shall be given to you. Pressed down, shaken together, running over, shall it be put into your lap. That giving there is tied with all those other statements, and it's talking about our lifestyle, a lifestyle of reaching out and giving and helping. And I've been amazed. On Wednesday nights, we look at our little dinner here we have, our meal, and everybody kind of comes together, at least the ladies come together and do that. And we have funeral dinners, and people are so willing to help and to give. And then there are people who, I find, hear the stories all the time. They run an errand for someone, or they go visit someone, or it's just been refreshing to see how you are willing to give of yourselves in a variety of ways. Sometimes it's fixing things, like the door over here. Gary, I think, put that in. And so I want to thank you for all that. And then I have a request for you this morning. I think it was 3 weeks ago, it could have been 4 weeks ago, we had a closing prayer here at our assembly. I think Ron led the closing prayer. And in that prayer, he made reference to Elisha and Elisha's prayer for his servant that his eyes might be opened. So I was curious about all that, and I went back and reread that story. And it's an interesting story about the king of Aram, or the Arameans. And that king has decided that he wants to destroy, like others have wanted to destroy, the nation of Israel, and the king of Israel. He wants to do battle. So he will gather together his military commanders, I guess we'd call them military generals, and he would begin to think about how we might lay strategy, including traps and attacks and whatever it might be, against the king of Israel. But as he would lay out those strategies, little did he know that Elisha was nearby. And Elisha has this power from God that God will put upon him over and over again during his lifetime. And so God gives Elisha the plans of the king of Aram. And so when this king is laying out a trap over here, Elisha will send word to the king of Israel saying, don't go over there, here's what's about to happen. Or avoid this area over here, or here's where the next battle is going to take place. And every single time, therefore, the king of Aram is so frustrated because nothing is working. And so he comes to the conclusion, I've got someone in my upper group of advisors, my commanders, my generals, whatever you want to call them. Someone is leaking material. Someone is telling someone, and they're in turn telling the king of Israel or something like that. Now, you and I are really familiar with that term leaking, aren't we? In our nation right now. I almost dread Monday because, people take things out of Washington and it's a big story and got a lot of moving parts to it, and they just kind of leak out through the media one little phrase to affect my thinking and your thinking and make us believe something that may not even be close to true. And that's kind of what's happening in this story. Somebody's giving out information. And so that king of Aram decides, okay, I'll bring my leaders together, and he begins to question, I'm going to find this guy who's giving out this information. Only finally the people with him say, it's not one of us. We're not doing it. It's Elisha, the man of God, the prophet of God. And now the king decides, okay, the thing I ought to do now is just get rid of Elisha. I'll destroy Elisha. And so he finds out that Elisha is down in the city of Samaria. So he sends this vast army. They surround the city. Elisha looks out, he sees all of the king of Aram's soldiers, and his servant looks out and sees all these soldiers. The servant is mightily afraid. Now you need to pause here and realize this servant may not have much experience with Elisha. He may be brand new to Elisha. Because the servant that always has been with Elisha from the beginning has a name, and his name is Gehazi, and we're kind of familiar with Gehazi. Gehazi had seen all these things that God had done through Elisha. Gehazi had witnessed the Shunammite boy being raised back to life after he was dead. And in chapter 5 of 2 Kings, right before chapter 6, Gehazi is the servant of Elijah that was there when this military leader, this rich, powerful military leader named Naaman, had come finally to Elisha saying, I've got leprosy, and they say you can do something about it. And Elisha says, all right, go put yourself in the river Jordan, dip 7 times, leprosy be gone. Well, he did that ultimately, and the leprosy's all gone, and he's so excited, he's brought with him bags of gold and silver and all these changes of clothing, and he offers all that to Elisha. Elisha will have nothing to do with it. I don't want any of your money. I don't want any of these changes of clothes. And they march away, Elisha and Gehazi. But Gehazi keeps thinking about the money. He keeps thinking about the clothes. And greed overtakes him, just like it does us once in a while. Greed overtakes him. And so he slips away from Elisha. He goes back to Naaman, and he says, my master's changed his mind. We'll take a little of that money. We'll take a few changes of clothes. Here are the reasons. And he's really happy to do it. How Gehazi rationalized to himself he could get by with this, I'll never know. But he did, until he gets back to Elisha. And Elisha knows everything. He says, where have you been? What have you done? Just like our parents did to us, remember those days? Where have you been? What have you done? The end of that story is that Gehazi takes upon himself, or it's placed upon him by the power of God, the leprosy that was on Naaman, only it's full blown. So you know that Gehazi is not going to any longer travel with Elisha. It's against Jewish law. You know he's probably put away somewhere. And now in chapter 6 we have a new servant. It seems. An unnamed servant. He doesn't have all this experience. And so he looks out and he sees this king of Aram's army and he thinks, we're done for. But Elisha will pause and say to him, the one who is for us is greater than the one who is against us. And then Elisha prays to God and says, will you open his eyes that he may see? And suddenly the servant's eyes are open, and he looks beyond the army of the Arameans, and he looks out there in the hills, and the hills are, it's like they're lighted up with all these chariots of fire and a vast, vast army beyond the king of Aram's army. And of course, God has the victory that day, and Elisha's not captured, Elisha's not hauled away, and he's certainly not killed. But my request is twofold. As we study, I hope in 2020 that you will join with me in praying every Sunday morning that God will open our eyes and open our minds and open our hearts that we may see what He's really saying to us. It's so easy. It's so easy to wear blinders. It's so easy to just see what we want to see. It's so easy to see things that are not really there. It's so easy to see things that are wrong. It seems to me that we beg God, open our eyes that we might see, that we might really see what you want. Then whatever we study will be more advantageous to all of us. Then I have this other final request. And that is, as we go through 2020, we're going to have troubles. Do you realize that? Now, I'm thinking about all the possibilities, and I'm thinking about all the good things, and I make myself get kind of excited about 2020s and 2021s and 2019s at the beginning of the year. But what I know for a fact is this year will hold trouble for me. And it'll hold trouble for you. We can't escape it. And what I really hope is that we can go back to that concept of trust constantly and use this phrase, perhaps, from Elisha. He who is on our side, he who is for us, is far greater than anything that can stand against us. That's truth. That's truth. And so as I go through this year, if I can just remember, no matter what comes, no matter what happens, God is on my side, and God's greater than anything else that could be out there. And He's greater than any trouble that can come. And we are assured the victory. So I want to begin the year by telling you, I appreciate the ability to study. We're going to launch into some studies that maybe I've done before, and maybe I haven't done them this way before. And some before the year ends that I haven't done before, maybe. And I want to thank you for being such givers. It caught my attention when I was listening just to a podcast and listening to this guy talk, and I thought, that's how those people are up at Northside. That's what we're doing up there. Every time I turn around, somebody's doing something. It's not me. You're doing it. And I thought, what a difference it could make if you and I would really speak to God every Sunday and ask Him, help us this morning to see what you want us to see. And what a different life it is when I go through the days of my life and say, He who is on my side is greater than those people who are against me right now, or these things that are against me, or this health that's against me, or whatever it might be. So that's what I hope we'll be in 2020. We're going to sing our final song. It's called an invitation song. Will you stand, please?